Sahlin. I am the creative director at Coldwood, and I made a game called Unravel, and I will be talking about this today. First off, just a quick summary of what Unravel is for those of you who might not know. Unravel is a game about love and about the bonds between people, and it uses yarn to represent those things. And the premise is that we're bound to the things we love. We're literally bound to the things that we love, and when we lose them, we start to unravel. And the goal is to help someone whose life has come apart. They're in pieces, and you are the red thread that ties all those missing parts back together. And it's most definitely not a power fantasy. You play this tiny little creature in a big and dangerous world, and you got lots of heart, but beyond that, you're not really that powerful. You're just doing what you can to help because it's the right thing to do. And you don't get to save the world either. You're just helping someone deal with their pain and loss. So it's not this like big, extravagant doomsday plot, but it is something that we can recognize because we all get lonely and we could all use some help reaching out sometimes. So we can empathize with that. And that's really what it's all about, empathy. You do nice things because it's the nice thing to do. So you might not get to be traditionally powerful, but you get to do some proper good. And I think that's pretty powerful in its own way. And I think games in general are really powerful things. They can make a huge impact. The bonds that they make with the audience are super strong. They can absorb our attention for hours and hours and take us places and transport us into an experience. And they can be emotional and inspiring and educational and provocative and beautiful and very intensely so. And games let us see things from new perspectives. They give us a chance to walk in someone else's shoes and share their experiences. And the way that they totally immerse us in a situation can help give us a deeper understanding of it. So games can be great at inspiring empathy. And they can also be kind of crap at it. Too often, I think, games settle for less. They choose distraction over deeper engagement. And too often, they just don't have anything interesting to say or anything nice to say. Or perhaps even worse, sometimes when they do have something good to say, when they do have an important message, they kind of say it so clumsily that people just stop listening. And I've made a ton of pointless games like that. Games that I'm not necessarily proud of. And I was fed up with it. I wanted to make something that was meaningful and enriching, something that might be a positive influence. Because I believe that games do influence us. Our culture shapes us as much as we shape it. And whatever impact our game might have, as simple or insignificant as that might be, I wanted it to be something positive. But I also knew that we had to do it kind of gently so that it wouldn't just put people off. Because whenever we sense that there's a message there, we tend to get kind of defensive. It's almost like we've been kind of conditioned to resist messages. And I wanted to tell this story about love and empathy, but I didn't want to talk about it necessarily. I just wanted it to be something that you felt, that you understood kind of intuitively. So in Unravel, we try to turn empathy into a game mechanic. Or maybe that's kind of like the wrong word for it, I don't know. But the whole purpose and the point of the game was to inspire empathy. And I figured that the best way to do that was actually to get just a little bit mean. Because first we give you this irresistibly sweet thing, just this absolutely gorgeous game that just immediately draws you in, and it's so friendly and it's charming and it's inviting. And I mean, I'm sorry for like bragging, but it really is. It's super beautiful. And the atmosphere is just magical, and it's so full of details, and there's this cute, endearing little character, and I wanted you to fall in love. I wanted you to fall head over heels in love with it at first sight. And then just turn everything around and snatch all that loveliness away and just like rip up all that sweetness, rip it to shreds, and just drop you down the deepest, darkest hole. It's cruel, but I mean, I wanted to break your hearts. I wanted to push you to the point of nearly giving up. Just because then we could make it all right again at the end. You emerge from that darkness into a light that just feels redeeming. Everything we took away, we give it all back again, but better and lovelier and friendlier. So we wanted maximum contrast, like we were moving from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high, and just moments before every single step was a struggle. And then you suddenly find yourself flying. And those sharp turns between light and dark, it made a real impact. You suffer in the dark parts because you remember what the light was like. We gave you something beautiful to lose, and we made sure that you lost it. And then when you're mended again, you can appreciate what it means to be whole because you know what it's like to be broken. And for some, that experience was quite profound. But it only works if people care. So how did we make them do that? Step one was to give people someone to care about, of course. And not the typical hero, but someone vulnerable, someone that would need their help to get through this journey. I wanted players to feel protective, like they were leading this character instead of just following or observing. And to make that work, that character, Yarny, had to feel like a real living, breathing thing, something that was more than just pixels. And looks were a big part of that. I don't think that's a rule. Like, it's not like more realistic visuals necessarily makes things more relatable. But in Unravel, it definitely helped. One of the core themes of the game is that you're tethered to the things that you love, and the farther away from them you get, the weaker you become. And we wanted players to be able to like actually see that, to see Yarny unraveling in this like vivid, almost like gory detail, losing loop after loop of yarn and gradually just wasting away and really suffering. So that when players saw that, they felt compassion. They felt bad about seeing that little creature hurting, and they were eager to set things right. So realism really helped us set the right tone. It helped us get people in the right mindset. Unravel tells this story without words, or mostly without words anyway. So Yarny doesn't actually speak, but still has to be able to say a lot. There was lots of discussion early on about the character design. People worried that it might not be expressive enough. So I used the Yarny doll that I made before to show just how much you can say through body language. And the cool thing about body language is that it's always on. Every single animation, or lack of animation, says something about the character. So the way Yarny stumbles after a long jump, for instance, or struggles to clamber over a ledge, it's quite endearing, and it builds the character. And we wanted to enforce this idea that you were playing as someone rather small and weak, that nothing you did should be easy. We did tweak it, though, because it has to be fun to play as well. So Yarny got progressively more and more capable, but we still wanted to enforce that notion that like, you're not a superhero. You're a fragile little thing on a really dangerous quest. And we had to let Yarny have some fun sometimes as well and be just a little bit silly. But there was one big rule, that it couldn't turn cartoonish. That was like a super important rule. Everything had to stay dignified. Because I think it's difficult to empathize with someone if you don't take them seriously. And situational awareness was incredibly important as well. Like, whatever happened, Yarny had to react to it like a living, intelligent being. So if there's a point of interest, Yarny looks at it. And when you swing on your yarn, there's ragdoll to give you proper weight. And if there's water, you can see Yarny kind of wading through it. And when you get out of the water, Yarny shakes the water off. And like, when you land hard after a jump, you see like these little stumbling steps. And there are tons and tons and tons of contextual animations and physics tweaks throughout the game for all kinds of different animations. Our animator, Sam Addo, and Jakob Marklund, who made all the code, they just like did a beautiful job of bringing Yarny to life. And Yarny had to react emotionally as well. Let me see if I can play this video. We wanted players to feel what Yarny was feeling, so we had to communicate that. So we used a thing called mood zones. These artist-defined areas where we could swap out any part of Yarny's moveset for a more emotionally charged version. So here, when the lightning strikes in a minute or in a second, you can see how the mood changes from the neutral to a more worried and scared version. And we use those mood zones a lot, both in like subtle and more dramatic ways. And this is from the darkest and most desperate level. It's this constant battle against the wind. And if you leave the light there, you're going to freeze to death. And every time the wind picks up, you can see Yarny struggling or stumbling if you're facing the other way. And then that lamp, when you pull it along with you, it's meant to feel like you're dragging your whole past behind you. So we made it look really, really heavy. And the lamp is your only safe spot in the level. So it has its own mood zone as well. So when you stand close to it, you can see Yarny kind of warming up, huddling closer to it, and you can see the snow starting to melt off as well. And without all of those animation levels, none of this would have worked. Like, this level would have been pretty much pointless. But because Yarny looks and acts like a real living being, it works, and it works really well. And once again, about looks, we're really obsessed with looks. The game world of Unravel had to be fiercely lovely. One look at it should be enough to draw you in and keep you in. I wanted that first impression of the game to be like a gut punch, just dropping you into this achingly beautiful place that's full of love and sadness and so many memories. And the goal was to create a place that felt like home, like a place to love and to come back to. So we wanted realism, but above all, we wanted to capture how things feel, not just how they look. And we put the camera really low, down at ground level, so you can get super close to everything and see and appreciate just how beautiful even the most ordinary things can be. And we wanted to saturate every area with detail so that the world looked alive and lived in, and so that the world could tell stories. Unravel is a game about mending broken bonds, and things like that don't happen without effort. So the gameplay had to reflect that. Things had to be a little bit difficult. So you had to face some real dangers. We wanted it to feel like a real accomplishment when you got to the end, but we had to balance it so we wouldn't scare everyone off. So what we did was we tried to make things seem harder than they really were. Near misses and narrow escapes are very useful. If a chase ends with a narrow escape, then that excitement, that last-minute excitement, is the only thing you remember. I wouldn't say we always got it right. We didn't. Insight is probably a better example if you want to like see how to use narrow escapes. But we kind of made it work. And also a note on danger in general. I guess death is like the most common fail state in games like this. But it kind of sucks as a tool when you're trying to build empathy for your character if you just keep killing it all the time. It's okay if it happens sometimes. It can even be a good thing. But if it happens too frequently, then players just get emotionally detached. So you can't ever treat your character like it's disposable. What we did was that we tried to fetishize death a bit instead. So when it did happen, it would have maximum impact. Like death shouldn't be used just as a quick reset. It should be like a wow moment or a cringe moment. It should make you react and feel like, oh dear, what did I do to that poor little thing? Like, as weird as it sounds to say, death has to be rewarding. And as much as we love brutal challenges and cruel deaths, we also had to leave space for things just to be nice sometimes. I had to give you some breathing room, places where everything was just lovely and peaceful, places where you didn't have to figure anything out or wonder what might come next, places that were just there for you to enjoy. The game does get progressively darker, but we still give you these little moments every now and then of hope and sweetness, just to keep your spirits up. So we went through all those steps to try to make people care. We had their attention, and what would we do with it? How would we get our message across? Especially since we wanted to tell the story without words. Well, it's important to remember that Unravel's story was meant to be more like a painting or a poem than a film or a comic. I had certain things in mind when I was writing it, but I tried to move away from the details and focus on the themes instead. I didn't want there to be one correct interpretation. I just wanted to inspire people to think for themselves. And hopefully it would make them feel good things, and I think that it did. So what we did was we just tried to fill the world with details and things that would inspire stories. You could say it's like scattered notes that you could just pick up and find and arrange into music yourselves. And speaking of music, Unravel's soundtrack was so important for the story. Frida Johansson and Henrik Oye, they did an absolutely amazing job creating the music. One of the team members joked that all we really needed to do to get an emotional reaction was just like slap some violence on it and people are gonna cry. And I think there's a little bit more to it than that, but he's not entirely wrong either. The whole purpose of Unravel's story is to inspire certain emotions and to make people think. And music is just a beautiful tool to do that. It's kind of like a 1-2 punch combo with gameplay, music and gameplay. One is the setup and the other is the knockout. Because gameplay gives us a super direct way to control the player's emotional journey. If you take a scene like this one, the kite flight, for instance, it's bound to make you smile. Even the first iteration we had, when the gameplay was like super bland, it still worked emotionally. It still made people smile. Because it feels light, it feels fun, it's maybe a little bit thrilling as well. It's like we have this big happy button we can just press to make people happy. And I guess we pressed the nostalgia button quite a bit as well. Like this scene from the summer garden of your childhood, and now it's all unkempt and overgrown and old and full of these links to the past that you lost. And using nostalgia and sentimentality, it's a balancing act because it can easily end up just drivel. But I think, or at least I hope, we stayed on the right side of okay. And I think it's worth trying because it is something that everyone can relate to in their own way. It's a universal thing, but it still feels personal. And pressing the unhappy button works pretty well too. And it's so easy to use. Actually, it's kind of almost too easy. I mean, it's not that hard to make someone scared or worried or anxious. It's like kicking in an open door. I prefer to try to make people happy, And not just like happy, but profoundly happy. And we just used all that negative stuff in Unravel as a means to enhance the positive stuff. We needed that contrast. So things had to get a bit dark at times. And sorry for that, but it was necessary. And I'm not sorry about the mosquitoes. If you played the game, you probably hate these things. And you should, because they're meant to be annoying. Because sometimes messing with you is the best way to get the right reaction. To me, that level is basically me as a kid picking berries with my mom and being like cold and wet and miserable and getting eaten alive and generally hating things. But I was also learning that good things don't come easy. And that when you get past the hard part, the effort sweetens the reward. And I mean, I know it sounds like something that you would put on a card, but it's still true. And it applies to a lot of things. And getting rid of those mosquitoes at the end of the level, it feels like sweet relief. It wouldn't have felt like that without the pain before. Or like in a later level where there's this big, huge, noisy, grinding, churning, booming, roaring machine that's just get louder and louder progressively through the level. When you finally shut that thing down, the silence feels like an embrace. It's so sweet. It's that contrast that makes it good. So don't worry too much about the flow state, because it's all right to mess with people sometimes. But you can push it too far. It didn't always work. Everything wasn't balanced perfectly in the game. We should have tested more. I know, for instance, like my son got to a section on the last level where Yarny just kept dying repeatedly. It was one of those sections that was meant to feel really dangerous, but not actually meant to be that dangerous. I think he might have stumbled onto a bug, I'm not sure. But up until then, he'd had like this perfect journey. He seemed to feel just exactly what I hoped that he would feel. But then you come to a section like that, and it takes you completely out of the illusion. And once you lose someone like that, you can't really count on winning them back. Luckily, I think we did, but I mean, you can't count on it. So it's a fine balance, and you have to test a lot, constantly, much more than what we did. So you can't test too much. It's really... So it wasn't perfect. But the good thing is, when it worked, it really worked. We've heard back from so many players who have had super strong reactions to the game. I know I joked that like the purpose of the game was to make people call their mothers. And I mean, that happened, and it's not like half of what happened. It's like, it's humbling to hear just how much the game has meant to some people and how deeply it has affected them. It probably wasn't that profound for everyone, but still, it's surreal to think that our little game did some actual proper good for people. And Unravel was just our first attempt at it. We were learning and making up the rules as we went along. And we're only going to get better. We're going to try harder to make games that matter. And we're just one small part of this movement, too. Games could have huge impact if we make it so. And I think we need that impact now more than ever, because the world has turned into a really scary place lately. There are all kinds of wrongs out there that need to be set right. And no, games won't fix all that. I mean, as much as I would like them to, games won't crush fascism, at least not on their own. But someone has to, and maybe we could help tip the scales in the right direction. Because we do have a platform. We have a voice, and it's our responsibility to use it. Through our games, we can talk to literally millions of people. Reaching out is easier now than it ever was. And I just can't see how we could not try to use that voice for something good. There's zero harm in trying, and maybe we can actually make a difference. Because I think that games do affect us. We know that people who play games are much more likely to have lucid dreams, for instance. You know, the dreams that you can control. And I have those things a lot. Dreams that would be like horrible nightmares. But I always seem to find a way to win. I don't know why that is, but I think it's because people who play games expect every problem to be solvable. We always want there to be a solution, and we refuse to give up until we've found that solution. And we eventually figure out how to overcome any difficulty. And that's a beautiful way of looking at things. And if games can do that, if they can change how we dream and how we think, what's to say that they can't change how we act? That's pretty powerful. And it's definitely an opportunity. And it would be nice if more of us try to make something good out of that opportunity. Thank you for listening. I do think we have time for like some questions, if people have questions. We have like 3 minutes or so. Sure.
Hi, beautiful game, Unravel. I haven't played it, but so it's a beautiful game. What I got from this is that Unravel is a game about empathy for oneself. So you play this game, and probably you project yourself onto, I don't remember, Yarny. Mm-hmm. And so this is a game that helps you probably self-heal. It probably was a healing journey for you as well. Maybe people can empathize with the creator as well. Those are all facets of the empathy exposed here. What I would ask you is if in the future you are thinking of fostering empathy for strangers, so actually using empathy in a multiplayer context, because of course saving the world or impacting the world starts in oneself. You have to empathize with yourself, you have to love yourself before you can love others, but like deeper change in the world is born from empathy with strangers in general. So I wonder if you could elaborate on this, and if this is something on your mind.
Do you want me to repeat the question, or actually, I'll just say this. Yes, it's true to say that this game is very much about building empathy for yourself and those close to you. And if there was one thing that I could like add to it and improve on it, it would be just that, to expand that circle and to include more people in that feeling of empathy, to make sure that, you know, build solidarity, build, you know, teach people to be nice, teach people to be inclusive. So yes, I would do exactly that. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
This looks like a stunning game, I have to say. I can imagine this could be very good for developing empathy for young children. And with that in mind, are you going to produce this for Google Play or iOS?
Sorry?
Are you going to produce this product for Android?
It's
a lot of work.
It's not really for me to say, because I'm not the most technically minded person. I certainly wouldn't mind. Like, every platform we can be on is nice.
And just make it more accessible for young children to have it on a tablet device.
But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, for a game whose narrative is so strongly visual, what was the writing process like? Did it involve lots of storyboarding or photography or mood boards or a combination of all different sorts of elements?
Photography was very much a big part of it. It sort of started with how the concept was created. I was basically, I mean, I don't know if you've heard this, but I was out camping in the woods and made this little doll and just ran around with it and started taking pictures of it doing strange things, because I didn't have any other tools except for camera and what I could find. So photography was always like a big part of the process. And since the whole thing about family bonds was also such like an important part right from the start, I actually like started with our photo albums. So a lot of the content was not actually created for the game, it was just things that I found that felt appropriate. So it was more, yeah, I don't know, I'm rambling a bit, but it was pretty much like my photo album and scissors and lots of glue.
I appreciated what you said about building games that matter. This is something that's been on my mind for the last few years, and I wondered if you have been able to find any communities or groups that connect around these topics that you'd be able to point out. I'd love to join the conversation in the broader sense of the gaming community, if that's something you know of.
I feel like it's a movement within the entire gaming community right now, and I think that's a really beautiful thing, that people are trying to be more inclusive and trying to be more responsible about what they make. So well, I can't point you to a specific thing. I know there are some, but I can't figure them out right now up here. But yeah, I mean, it feels like the entire industry is shifting towards that, and it makes me really happy to see that people care more about what they make and care more about the impact of what they make.
Absolutely. Thank you, and thank you for making this game.
Thank you. I guess that's all we had time for, so thanks a lot for coming.